was in you were angry because of endorsement of Governor DeSantis in Florida, and so you were defending Donald Trump, and so you criticized Elon Musk, and that was the context for it. And you said Elon Musk cares about two things: your data and his money, and it matters to us because he's playing such a major role in the government. And so I just wonder if you think that's true.
I don't have that full quote in front of me to respond.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It sounds to me like my fellow senator is trying to get you to move FBI headquarters to Alabama. I have a full list of why it should move to Florida, and at the very least, maybe a Florida-Bama FBI HQ.
Florida-Bama.
Good people there, good recruits. We would fully support it. Moving on to a more serious matter, I know you would be shocked to learn this. As AG and as the chair of the Human Trafficking Council in Florida, we saw trafficking explode around the nation as a result of the Biden administration wide open borders. That's no surprise to anyone. But it might shock you to know that the National Human Trafficking Hotline that was funded by Congress to report tips to law enforcement in the last 4 years decided that they would no longer report tips to law enforcement, that they would take a more victim-centered approach. And this fell in line with a lot of what we saw over the last 4 years, with people saying things like defund the police, abolish the police, nonsense policies that lead to an explosion in crime. You and I both understand that from our prior work experience.
Absolutely.
So there was a CEO that was put in charge in the last 4 years who said that that we cannot arrest our way out of the human trafficking problem. And I quote, "Trafficking in all its forms is the end result of inequities, abuses of power, and massive systemic and government failures." Do you believe that that is in fact the cause of human trafficking, or is it the result of evil, heinous humans that seek to profit off of others' pain?
The only people responsible for human trafficking are the criminals that intentionally traffic in humans, in children, and exploit them. And if I'm confirmed, it will be one of the top priorities to make sure that doesn't happen in this country and that we find the thousands of missing children that are still missing.
I, along with many of the other attorneys general in this nation in a bipartisan fashion, not only demanded that they begin reporting tips to law enforcement so that they could follow up and go after the traffickers so that they didn't continue to victimize others, but we also came to Congress and tried to get funding pulled, or at least a mandate that they do what they were created to do, and that is to report tips to law enforcement. Do I have your word moving forward as someone who understands the necessity to go after traffickers, to not only identify and rescue victims, but to ensure there aren't other victims? Do I have your word you'll work with me to come to Congress to make sure that that happens so that that can never happen again?
You do, Senator.
I'm proud to say in Florida, we were able, when we didn't get that result here in Congress, we started our own hotline. It's one of the first in the nation. And no surprise, we immediately rescued 10 victims of human trafficking that were being held by force in massage parlors. Reporting to law enforcement works. It allows us to rescue and save lives. And I know you will bring that mission focus back to the FBI.
Thank you, Senator. I will.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to touch on something that's been on my mind lately, and I will tie it back to this hearing. We have seen a wholesale attack and assault in the past 2 weeks by President Trump on the value of diversity. Through his executive orders, he is seeking to dismantle over 60 years of work to promote equal opportunity in the federal government. His pronouncements have gotten so bad that apparently the Defense Intelligence Agency issued a memo 2 days ago that it would no longer commemorate Martin Luther King Day, Women's History Month, Holocaust Day of Remembrance, or Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and so on. Why is there such a fear of people who are different? In Hawaii, we celebrate diversity and know that it gives us strength. It is part of what makes Hawaii and America great. Mr. Patel, earlier you shared some deplorable racist rhetoric that had been used against you. As someone who has also been the recipient of this sort of hateful language, I am deeply sympathetic. I also note, Mr. Patel, that in the past, you have recognized the value of diversity. Back when you were in law school, you signed on to an amicus brief in the Grither case, supporting consideration of race in law school admissions. I hope that joining the Trump administration will not cause you to change your views on the value of diversity. Reflecting on this hearing, it is sad that we are considering Mr. Patel's nomination despite his gross inadequacy to do the job of FBI director fairly and objectively. Yet there is no question that much pressure has been brought to bear on my Republican colleagues to support this nomination. For example, a man named Mike Davis has been threatening my Republican colleagues. He said that this vote was a red line, that if Senate Republicans don't vote to confirm Mr. Patel, his organization, a group called the Article 3 Project, would make their lives a living hell. I certainly hope that all of us will base our vote on your nomination on the best interest, who can work in the best interest of our country, and not based on this sort of pressure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to give you a chance to respond to this because I think my colleagues are misstating the law here. You can't authorize the release of your grand jury testimony. Only a court can do that. Is that right?
That's been my understanding.
Yeah, and you I think you've stated that the best reflection and the most accurate version of your testimony is the transcript in the grand jury testimony, that you're fine to be released, but the court has to go do that, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. And it lasted like 3 or 4 days, is that what you were saying?
Yes.
Yeah. I also want to, Senator Durbin's talked about, what your priority or your priorities will be. And I think your testimony has been that it'll be adherence to the Constitution and the people of the United States of America, right? You take that very seriously.
That's it. That's the only thing that matters.
Could you talk about maybe some other priorities? We talked initially in my first round about getting the FBI back to its core mission, which is to fight crime and not, sort of try to do the things that it's been doing the last 4 years. Talk about how you might bring that together.
So, Senator, I appreciate the question. It's something I wanted to address maybe 6 hours ago, so I appreciate the opportunity to do it now. Whether we prioritize going after violent crime and national security, we cannot defend against either of those successfully unless we go after the underlying criminal nexus there. And whether it's human trafficking, whether it's terrorism, whether it's opioids, and whether it's just outright gang violence, the intersection there is narco trafficking. It is the underlying underbelly, the evil, illegal underbelly of all those operations. And we have not prioritized, in my opinion, as a law enforcement agency, the collective power we can rain down on criminal narco trafficking networks. And ideally, if I'm confirmed, Senator, I would like to work with Attorney General Pam Bondi, if she can be confirmed, to set up regional drug interdiction task force where our local sheriff's offices, our local PDs, and our local precincts are folded in with the FBI on an information and authority sharing basis to take down the criminal networks. And the advice and consent process has been extremely informative this to me. I do not know your jurisdictions as well as you all ever will. That's what makes this so critically important educational. I did not know that Memphis was the homicide capital of America per capita. I did not know that there was a corridor in Ohio that speaks to the human trafficking volume more so than any intersection in the country. That is what I will rely on your expertise across the aisle to fold in those resources and target those criminal active hotbeds. And I believe if we are successful in actually crippling the narco trafficking networks, we will see a decrease monumental in violent crime and at the same time protecting Americans' national security.
And maybe, just maybe, where you have a third of the personnel for the FBI here in Washington, D.C., maybe, just maybe, one of the reforms is to get more of those folks out into those areas across the country to go do that, right? That's what you're talking about.
I think so, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Patel, do you know any of these 5 individuals? Erica Knight, Tom Ferguson, Greg Menser, Steve Reese, or Carlos Fernandez?
Yes, Senator.
Who are they?
People I've worked with in the past at some point.
I'm told that those are the people that will be additional political appointees to help run the FBI. Is that correct?
That's news to me, Senator.
Under the history of the Federal Bureau of Investigation since the reforms in the early 1970s, there's only been one political appointee. I'm told that these will be additional political appointees, 5 extra political appointees. Do you know if Reese or Fernandez are affiliated with SpaceX or Elon Musk?
I don't.
I'm told that they are affiliated with SpaceX and Elon Musk, and that he had influence in who will be placed around you as political appointees. Mr. Patel, did you see the President of the United States declassify the documents that were found at Mar-a-Lago?
I witnessed the President of the United States issue a declassification order for documents.
That did not answer my question. Did you or did you not see the President of the United States declassify the documents that he was holding, the classified documents that were at Mar-a-Lago? And did you?
I don't know the answer to that question because I don't know what was fully found because the Justice Department hasn't made that public.
You claim publicly that you saw President Trump declassify documents. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
So you did indeed see President Trump declassify the documents that were found at Mar-a-Lago that he refused to turn over. Is that correct?
No, what I said, Senator, was I heard and witnessed the President issue a declassification order for a number of documents.
For the documents specifically that were at Mar-a-Lago?
When he issued that order, there was documents. I don't know what was found and what was not found at Mar-a-Lago. I wasn't there.
So this is the issue. The question is will you lie for the President of the United States? Would you lie for Donald Trump?
No.
I hear you saying no, but the best way to clarify that would be to testify, as you are allowed by law, upon what you said to the grand jury. Because that grand jury, as you just said to my colleague, 2 or 3 days of it was about this specific issue. And so as my time ends, Mr. Chairman, it would be utterly irresponsible for this committee to move forward with his nomination unless we know factually, which can be proven by looking at the documents that he's refusing to testify towards. It would be irresponsible for us to move forward if we do not know that the future head of the FBI would break the law and lie for the President of the United States. We can find that out factually if we had access to the testimony or if he would tell us what he said to the grand jury, which by the law of the United States of America, he's allowed to, but he's refusing to do so. He is refusing the transparency that he claims to adhere to. He is refusing to be direct with the United States Senate. He's refusing to be transparent and put it all out there. Did he or did he not lie for the president? That is the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that, and thank you for your patience today. We do appreciate it. Just for the record, Mr. Chairman, I put up the clip that showed me requesting the records for Epstein. That is, I put that up on social media just so we could clarify that issue. Mr. Patel, what I'd like to ask you about, you mentioned that Memphis is the homicide capital of the country. That concerns us. And we've recently had an issue where the FBI wanted to consolidate the Memphis and Knoxville offices into a Nashville office. And of course, this causes us some concern. And I would like to get your commitment that you will make certain that we have every resource we need in Memphis to deal with this issue, and that the FBI will be appropriately resourced in the state of Tennessee.
You absolutely will, Senator.
Thank you so much for that. And then we've had some talk today about DEI, and we've talked about this in this committee, and the emphasis the FBI put on DEI and things like counting Swifty bracelets and things of that nature, and not on investigations. And what we want to make certain is that we have qualified individuals who are going to stick to that core mission. And you have talked about that mission today, and thank you for being able to recite what it is. We appreciate that. And I want you to just talk a little bit about those first few actions that you can take to build back the recruiting and the training in order to accomplish that mission.
Absolutely, Senator. Quite simply, I know we have limited time, is that people who sign up to serve the FBI must meet the rigorous high standards, merits, and physical fitness standards, and those will not be changed.
So that will be a priority for you.
And I think people who want to join the FBI do so with the dedication to serve this country and an adherence to law enforcement. And we will allow those folks that graduate from the academy and enter the FBI to carry a gun and a badge in representation of this country to protect its citizens. And when we allow the good cops to be cops and put handcuffs on the bad guys, I think you will see an exponential increase in enrollment and how we keep people at the FBI.
And that is a day one item for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Patel, do you believe that background checks for firearm purchases are constitutional?
I don't know the in-depths of it, but I think that's what the Supreme Court has said, Senator.
So the word would be YES, yes. Can you say yes? Are background checks constitutional?
I can say whatever the Constitution and the Supreme Court ruled is the rule of the land.
And what is the law of the land at the moment?
I'm not an expert on state-by-state background checks.
You're going to be universal background checks. Well,
that's different.
I think actually your answer is pretty telling. Let me ask you another question. Do you believe that civilian ownership of machine guns are protected by the Second Amendment?
Universal background checks are different. That's not what
I
you
asked you a
say.
separate question. Do you believe civilian ownership of machine guns is protected by the Second Amendment?
Whatever the courts rule in regards to the Second Amendment is what is protected by the Second Amendment.
Yet another telling response, colleagues, on another important issue. We've all talked, both sides of the aisle, about our concern about gun violence in America. I raise these questions because of an association I can observe between Mr. Patel and Gun Owners of America, a group staunchly opposed to firearm regulation, a group that Mr. Patel addressed in August, and a group that in December issued a press release applauding his nomination to be FBI director. Gun Owners of America has taken extreme positions, including the position that all background checks are unconstitutional and that civilian ownership of machine guns is protected under the Second Amendment. Mr. Patel, let me remind you that as FBI director, you would oversee critical responsibilities related to firearm regulation, including administering the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. Yes, it's constitutional. It's in place for a reason. You would also regulate the distribution of machine guns to prevent them from falling into the wrong hands. Policies and programs in place for a reason. And given your hesitancy, given your answers, I'm concerned about your ability to do the job when it's not in alignment with groups like Gun Owners of America. Colleagues, we've been hearing a lot of partial responses and lack of recollections throughout the day, and I can't help but identify the pattern of Mr. Patel calling FBI leadership corrupt, labeling agents as gangsters, accusing them of being part of a criminal deep state conspiracy. We've heard of his experience with the J6 prison choir, a group of individuals convicted for their roles in the January 6th insurrection. We've heard his false claims that the U.S. had secured airspace permissions during a high-stakes SEAL team hostage rescue mission in Nigeria. I can go on and on. These positions are inconsistent with the role of FBI director, a position that demands independence, professionalism, and unwavering commitment to the rule of law. Mr. Patel, your loyalty to President Trump and the MAGA movement may score you points in some quarters, but they are certainly not the qualities necessary to serve as director of the FBI. And Mr. Chair, just in closing, I understand while I was out of the room earlier that Senator Tillis raised my name and attributed to a quote, bent the knee as part of my questioning earlier to me. And so for the record and for my colleague from North Carolina, I want to clarify that the bent the knee quote were not my words. I was quoting Mr. Patel as he appeared on the Sean Ryan show on September 2nd of 2024. And I'm happy to share a link, Senator Tillis, to clarify. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I don't want to belabor this, but it certainly would be of benefit to us if that grand jury testimony could be released. But my understanding is the Senator Whitehouse testimony point that you don't need you as a witness could reveal what you said, and I'm just suggesting you might give that some further thought. The second thing is that you have everybody who runs an agency has enormous responsibility for the people who work there. I happen to have an incredibly high opinion of the FBI. The first time I came to Washington as a boy, I remember the thrill I had going to the FBI headquarters. I thought it was a big deal that my senator then got me special tickets to go, and I've always admired them. There's a lot of apprehension there, and it's not just on this question of weaponization. There's a lot of disruption in a new administration. And if you've seen, the president announced an impoundment in effect. It's been rescinded by the courts. But we've received calls from folks in various agencies who we've worked with or seen over the years, and there's just an immense amount of insecurity. Do I have my job? Don't I have my job? And frankly, I think this is my point to the president. Chaos is one thing, but cruelty is another. And having people be really uncertain about do they have a job today or not and leaving them in limbo, I don't think is a good thing for morale. And I don't care whether it's a Democratic or Republican president. I'm just looking to you to assure me that the tradition that we've had anchored in the FBI since 1972, when it was politicized, I mean, J. Edgar Hoover went after Martin Luther King in a disgusting and despicable way. He went after some John Birch Society folks for their political beliefs in a disgusting and horrible way. And we have no political appointees over there. So it's going to be up to you to, I think, strengthen that tradition. And we heard about the political appointees who are over there now, or I guess they're not officially appointees, but they've been sent by the administration. You didn't know about it. But one of them is from SpaceX. And, you know, Elon Musk, he's a rich guy, but he has no authority other than what's delegated by the president, but he has no official authority. And why is it, you can't answer this, but do you want somebody like Elon Musk peering over your shoulder, telling you what to do about personnel?
No, the FBI must be independent.
Go kick him out. I mean, I'm with you on that. He has no basis. He has no reason to be there. There's some former FBI people. You'll pick the people that you want to listen to. You'll have to make the decisions. You'll be accountable to this committee. But no on Elon Musk. He's just a political crony who knows nothing about law enforcement. So thank you for that assurance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Patel, when Mr. Booker was asking you questions in his first round, you said, Senator, the grand jury testimony is available to you. I encourage you to make it public. You also later said, or previously to Mr. Booker said, get my grand jury testimony. I asked the Department of Justice to make it public. I asked the Department of Justice to make it public. Do you stand by that testimony?
If that's what I said.
So you asked the Justice Department to make your grand jury testimony public?
At the time of my appearance in the grand jury.
Yeah. And who did you ask to do that?
The lawyers.
Mr. Chairman, since the witness has said that he encourages this testimony to be public, that he in fact asked the Justice Department to make it public, I would ask you, Mr. Chairman, if you and the ranking member would be willing to write to the court acknowledging the witness has asked for this to be public, supporting it being made public. I can't imagine there's a court in the land that would say no to a bipartisan request like that.
I won't tell you. Let me say something. I'm not going to take this out of your time. It's not directly answering your question, but I think it'd be significant what Richard Grinnell put on X. I testified in front of Jack Smith's grand jury, the Justice Department, and Jack Smith's prosecutor told me directly that I could not talk about my testimony or risk legal actions. Then he goes on to say that certain senators, I won't mention here, should, as those lawyers, ask those lawyers why they instructed witnesses this way.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'd welcome the chance to have Mr. Grinnell testify under oath as opposed to on X. But nevertheless, what I would ask, given that this witness has said he made the request, this witness has said he would like us to read the testimony, I would ask if you and Mr. Durbin would be, Senator Durbin would be willing to make that request of the court.
I wouldn't answer your question without get all the background I need, considering the conversation between you two. I couldn't make that judgment now.
Yeah, I appreciate your consideration, Mr. Chairman. And the reason why I think it's so important is let's remind ourselves what those documents were in Mar-a-Lago. According to the indictment, the classified documents Trump stored in his boxes included information regarding defense and weapons capabilities of both the United States and foreign countries, United States nuclear programs, potential vulnerabilities of the United States and its allies to military attack, and plans for possible retaliation in response to a foreign attack. So testimony that goes to the care or lack of care, the truthfulness or lack of truthfulness of Mr. Patel would be directly relevant to whether he should be confirmed as FBI director, and those records are there for the asking. No court's going to turn us down. Mr. Patel may be, I don't know, but he may be the first nominee for FBI director in history who felt it necessary to plead the fifth, to say that he wouldn't testify to a grand jury because it might incriminate him. Maybe the first nominee for FBI director ever to feel the necessity of pleading the fifth. Shouldn't we ask for that testimony when the witness himself says he would encourage it? Finally, I would just say, we need to think about where we are in this moment. We have a new president. He's fired prosecutors who investigated him. He's investigating other prosecutors, or his Department of Justice is. He's fired inspector generals who might hold him accountable. And this is just the start. And as FBI director nominee, he's chosen someone whose primary qualification, in my view, is his willingness to say yes when everyone else would say no to whatever the president wanted, to say whatever he wanted, to do whatever he wanted. That's why he is sitting here. I mean, look at the people who held that job before Mr. Patel, the stature of the people that held that job, the qualifications of the people that held that job. And how can any of us think that his background, his qualifications hold a candle to the people who went before him? How did we get here where we are defending a nominee like this, who makes songs with convicts who attack law enforcement? How did we get here? And where are we going? History is littered with democracies that lost their freedoms and didn't notice it while it was happening. Let's not be one of them.
Your time's up. Before Senator Tillis ends this, I want to put in the record a letter from the parents of Caleb Mueller. Mr. Patel met them through his role in the successful operation to track and kill ISIS leader al-Baghdadi. The terrorist, I'm quoting, the terrorist group ISIS kidnapped our daughter, Kayla, on August 2013. Any family who has lived through such an experience will know the value of dedicated, compassionate law enforcement officials. Because we have personal experience of his dedication, we know that Kash Patel is such a person. We continue to see in him a genuinely kind, thoughtful, action-oriented man who focuses on what is true and right and just. He loves our country and our citizens and wants the best for them all. He wants the country to do the best that it can. Without objection, I'll put their letter in the record. Senator, tell us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Patel, I think everything that I did to invest in knowing you better has been on display today. Congratulations. You've exhibited composure, knowledge of the subject matter that I think more than qualifies you for director of the FBI. You know, we seem to have the benefit of sort of a different view of looking at the history. I heard, I actually was supportive of Comey until I figured out that he was playing games. Maybe this is one of the people of great stature, but it's well known now that he did some things that seem to have a political tint to them. I voted for Christopher Wray. I think he's a good man, but I also think he oversaw a department that did bad things. And at the end of the day, that person has to own it, and you will too. You know, it's probably going to disappoint the audience to hear what I'm about to say, those who are watching at home. But you may be surprised to know that most of us at this dais on both sides of the aisle like each other. Senator Schiff and I just met within the last week to talk about areas that we can work together on. Senator Padilla and I actually worked together. We co-chair the bipartisan mental health caucus, and I believe it's actually one of the most important pieces of legislation we've done. I didn't get a whole lot of Republicans to vote for it, but a fair number. And this is working extraordinarily well. Would you commit to me to go into the Nix Center in West Virginia and just see how extraordinary this has come to be and how it hasn't resulted in a mass confiscation of guns? It hasn't resulted in a propagation of red flag laws. In fact, the plain text of the legislation is not allowing money to flow to states, unfortunately, including Florida, that we believe have not gotten the due process right quite yet so that we would actually fund red flag laws that make sense. This is what bipartisanship produces. Now, you're not going to see any bipartisanship in your confirmation. Look, we had Pam Bondi here, and we had people on this committee talking about a friendship or a friendly relationship in the past. The fact is, it was a shirts and skins game. Blue voted no, red voted yes. It's got to be the same thing for your confirmation. But Mr. Patel, I tell you, it has been a distinct honor to do the work with you to get you ready for this hearing. You did all the work. I'm kind of like the person on the sideline giving you some suggestions, but you did an extraordinary job. And you're going to be held to a high standard. I hope you listen to, and if you don't remember it, listen again to what Senator Kennedy said. There are folks like us that are tired of the pendulum swinging back and forth. We want to be the Senate that confirms an FBI director, that rights the ship, shows consistent respect for the rule of law and the Constitution, consistent respect for all law enforcement officers, and I absolutely believe you're up to the task, and I look forward to supporting your nomination.
Thank you, Senator.
Before I close the meeting, you have anything you want to say? Nope. I've got something here that's directly related. When in my opening statement, I said I want the members of this committee to think about something that's brand new. And it kind of deals with this whole exchange we had today in regard to the grand jury testimony. So I want to read, based upon whistleblower disclosures that I made today, it's clear how unfair and corrupt the Trump prosecution was, and that's created a little faith at best in the grand jury process. We shouldn't allow part of that corrupt process to be used by this committee against the nominee. An example, one document I made public today, DOJ officials literally concurred with Thibault to open the elector case against Trump, and that included a grand jury investigation. Jack Smith's lawfare efforts and its corrupt process should be what this committee investigates. Mr. Patel, thank you for your testimony today. Your family and friends who are here, I think you got to be very proud of him under these tough conditions because he got tough questions. I think you did very well. And your reputation leading up to and during this hearing, I think proves that you're a person that can stand a lot of heat, including a president's telling you how to do your job. If confirmed, you'll be in charge of one of the world's best law enforcement agencies at the time when it desperately needs strong changes. For everyone's information, written questions can be submitted for the record until 5 p.m. tomorrow. Mr. Patel, when you receive them, it's very important you get back to us just as fast as you can so we can set up the meetings that we have to go through to get you to the floor of the Senate. So return them to the committee as soon as possible. Mr. Patel, you are excused and the hearing is adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Limits so that we can proceed efficiently. And I thank each of the members of this committee because when we had Attorney General nominee Bondi here, everybody stayed within their time. I expect Mr. Patel to be treated fairly by my colleagues. We're here today to consider the nomination of Kash Patel to serve as director of the FBI. You're nominated, Mr. Patel, to one of the most important offices in our government. And to get here this far along in the process of your nomination, you gave us much information. You submitted over 1,000 pages of records to the committee, over 1,000 individual interviews, and many hundreds of hours of media. Thank you. I thank your family for coming. I know some of them have traveled to get here, and I know they're very proud of you, and I determined that by looking them in the face. Public trust in the FBI is low. Only 41% of the American people think the FBI is doing a good job. This is the lowest rating in a century. It's no surprise that public trust has declined in an institution that has been plagued by abuse, lack of transparency, and weaponization of law enforcement. Nevertheless, the FBI remains an important, even indispensable institution for law and order in our country. It's the people on the top floor of the J. Edgar Hoover building, not your local FBI agents, that have caused the low approval rating. Mr. Patel, I know you know this, but it's your job to restore the public trust and return the FBI to its core mission of fighting crime. Your extensive background gives you a unique position to make this happen. Mr. Patel's career has been a study in fighting unpopular but righteous causes, exposing corruption, and putting America first. For almost a decade, Mr. Patel served as a public defender, defending the constitutional rights of some of the least popular people in this country. After serving as a public defender, Mr. Patel joined the Department of Justice under President Obama as a counterterrorism prosecutor in the National Security Division. In this role, he investigated and he prosecuted many important cases, including the World Cup bombing in Uganda in 2010, for which he received an award of excellence. In 2017, Representative Devin Nunes asked Mr. Patel to join the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence to uncover the truth about Russiagate. And Mr. Patel did uncover the truth. It was during this period of time that, if you remember, I first met you, Mr. Patel. Through tireless works, Mr. Patel showed that Crossfire Hurricane was based upon fraudulent, discredited information paid for by the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign. As reward for his efforts to uncover the truth, mainstream media, can you believe this, personally attacked Mr. Patel, and the FBI secretly subpoenaed his records. Now, I know what that is because my staff received similar treating during my investigation. The attacks Mr. Patel faced during his work in the House of Representatives are similar to the ones that he faces today. I expect many of these underhanded attacks will be repeated today. Mr. Patel has been accused of having, quote unquote, an enemies list. This is not a fair characterization, as he stated, quote, there is no revenge list, end of quote. Mr. Patel has identified those he believes have put politics and personal ambition over service to the country. He's called out those who've used the institutions like the FBI to achieve their own personal gain. Mr. Patel has said he believes that people who do this should be named and that Americans deserve transparency so that they can make their own judgment as they did in this last election. Other attacks against Mr. Patel are similarly unfounded. To take just one example, he's been accused of jeopardizing hostage rescues. In fact, those allegations have been repeatedly shown to be false smears. As numerous national security officials have said publicly and on the record, Mr. Patel played a critical role in returning Americans safely home and has done so through hard work and personal cost to him. Mr. Patel has been accused of being unqualified to be FBI director. This suggestion ignores his impressive career at the highest levels of government service. After exposing Russiagate scandal in the Congress, Mr. Patel served in roles such as Senior Director, Counterterrorism at the National Security Council, Deputy Director of National Intelligence, and Chief of Staff to the Acting Secretary of Defense. Mr. Patel managed large intelligence and defense bureaucracies, identified and countered national security threats, prosecuted and defended criminals. He's done this while fighting for transparency and accountability in the government. Mr. Patel has precisely the qualifications we need at this time when the FBI is not being respected by our public. Mr. Patel, should you be confirmed, you'll take charge of an FBI that is in crisis. Recently, my oversight exposed that a special agent in charge of the FBI New Orleans field office was on vacation during New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. Of course, that was also included the Sugar Bowl. Senior personnel should be at their posts, not on vacation, during critical security events. And we all remember what happened at that time in New Orleans. But of course, this FBI agent would find it acceptable to do what he did. In August 2022, an FBI oversight hearing of this committee, Director Ray decided to leave early. I asked him to stay just 1 hour and 20 minutes longer, but he already made up his mind that he was going to leave. Later, under questioning in November of that year by Senator Hawley, Director Ray admitted that he left this committee hearing early so that he could go on vacation. These two incidents Among others are examples of the blatant disrespect that the FBI leadership has shown to this committee and indirectly to the American people. In November 22, I released internal FBI records that my office received pursuant to lawful whistleblower disclosures. Those records provided data about how hundreds of FBI employees who had retired or resigned to avoid discipline, many of those employees engaged in sexual misconduct in the worst workplace. Those records also showed lower level FBI employees were punished. Lower level employees of the FBI were punished more harshly than senior level employees. No, fairness was out the window. Over 1 year later, with no response from the FBI, I asked Director Wray about this at a December 5, 23 hearing before this committee. He publicly pledged to get me the data I requested November, a year before. He and his deputy director never followed through. I also questioned Director Wray about improperly classified information relating to Afghan evacuees placed in our country. At that time, approximately 50 evacuees were already deemed potential national security concerns. So what's the number now? The public has a right to know. I've also raised concerns about whistleblower disclosure, saying that the FBI moved agents from child sex abuse cases to those January 6 cases. The FBI under Director Wray never got his priorities straight. With respect to weaponization, I'd like to turn to a letter I wrote July 20 of 2022. That letter noted that Assistant Special Agent in charge, Thibault, was a key official involved in opening the elector case that became the Jack Smith lawfare operation. That's not supposed to happen. An official at Thibault's rank and position isn't supposed to open cases. That's the job of special agents. For those who don't remember, Thibault was the anti-Trump agent that violated the Hatch Act for his political conduct in office. My letter also noted that Richard Pilger, who ran the Justice Department's election crime branch, was involved in the approval. Now I'd like to call the committee's attention to something I'm going to share with you, information about the FBI's that's never been made public before. Do you have those? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. In my hand are a series of FBI emails. The first is an email that Thibault sent to subordinate agent on February the 14th, 2022. He said, quote, "Here's a draft opening language we discussed," end quote. The draft opening was attached and it included material that would later become part of Jack Smith's elector case. The second email, February 24th, 2022, email from Thibault to John Crabb, a prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia, saying, quote, "I had a discussion with the case team and we believe there is predication to include former President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, as a predicated subject," end quote. This FBI case would later be codenamed Arctic Frost. The third email, February 24th, 2022, email from Tebow to John Crabb, noting that the Attorney General and the FBI approval will be sought to open the case. The fourth email, February 25th, 2022, email from Tebow's subordinate agent saying they added Trump and others as a criminal subject to the case. Tebow responded, quote unquote, perfect. The fifth email, March 22, 2022, from Tebow, emailing a version of an investigative opening for approval. This didn't include President Trump. I want to make clear, that one didn't include President Trump as a criminal subject. The sixth email is on April 11th, 2022, from Tebow approving the opening of Arctic frost. The seventh email is an April 13th, 2022 email from FBI agent to Tebow stating that the FBI deputy director approved its opening. The eighth email on the same date had Tebow emailing John Crabb that the elector case was approved. Crabb responded, quote, thanks a lot. Let's talk next week, end quote. Between March 22nd and April 13th, other versions of the document opening the investigation existed because a ninth email shows that the FBI General Counsel Office made edits on March 25th. Was Trump still removed as an investigative subject? If so, which Justice Department FBI officials other than Jack Smith later added him for prosecution? I expect the production of all records on this matter to better understand the full fact pattern and whether other records exist. Notably, approval of these documents was also given by Richard Pilger. This committee has written about Pilger undermining the Justice Department's efforts during the 2020 election for partisan purposes. These emails and documents substantiate my July 2022 letter, which the FBI ignored. And I hope you, when you get there, won't ignore my letters. Partisan FBI agents and DOJ officials tried and ultimately succeeded in launching a full field criminal investigation and prosecution of the President of the United States. Justice Department and FBI leadership acted in concert to further a political scheme to take down Trump, just like they did with Crossfire Hurricane. They have yet to learn a lesson, and I hope you'll learn that lesson for them or teach that lesson. And their conduct, yet again, seriously eroded integrity of this once storied institution. As I've said before, if a politically charged investigation is to be open, it must be done the right way, and that didn't happen here. Mr. Patel, in my time, I've never seen our law enforcement intelligence community institutions so badly infected with political decision-making. And I say intelligence community because you know what happened when 55 people, former or present intelligence agencies, signed a letter in 2020 that the laptop was a Russian hoax, as an example. So all of this is these institutions breaking faith with we the people. Mr. Patel, you must be fair, you must be consistent, but you must be aggressive. Your actions must be based on accountability, and transparency brings accountability. Should you do so, you'll have my support. And remember, either you're going to run your agency or the agency's going to run you. And the agency certainly ended up running Director Wray and probably people before him. Without objection, I'm going to put in this letter in the record, and this letter is sent to Director Ray December the 9th last year, calling for him and his deputies to step down, and it's titled, quote unquote, failures. Now I turn to Ranking Member Durbin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your commitment to the Judiciary Committee's longstanding bipartisan practice of vetting presidential nominees. A little history. The FBI dates back to the start of the last century, 1908, when then Attorney General Charles Bonaparte organized a special agent force. J. Edgar Hoover became director of the FBI in 1924 and led the Bureau for 48 years until his death in 1972. He is credited with professionalizing the Bureau and developing its investigative ability. However, with little or no oversight, Hoover also used the Bureau's investigative powers improperly. He infamously directed the FBI to spy on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Thurgood Marshall, and other civil rights leaders of the day. In 1975, the United States Senate created Frank Church's committee, and they disclosed widespread abuses by the FBI and other U.S. intelligence agencies. The Church Committee concluded these agencies had engaged in illegal surveillance, and as a result, quote, groups and individuals have been assaulted, repressed, harassed, and disrupted because of their political views, social beliefs, and their lifestyles. And quote, the intelligence agencies have served the political and personal objectives of presidents and other high officials. The Hoover era of the FBI, the Watergate scandal, and the findings of the Church Committee highlighted the risk of political interference in FBI investigations and led to significant, important reform. In 1976, Congress passed a law that limits the FBI director to a single term of 10 years, which was intended to insulate that position from political influence. And critically, we made the FBI director's appointment subject to the advice and consent of the Senate. That's why we're here today. Since 1935, the motto of the FBI has been fidelity, bravery, integrity. These qualities represent the Bureau's core values and the high standards that are expected of all of its employees, including the director of the FBI. After meeting with Mr. Patel and reviewing his record, I do not believe you meet this standard. Mr. Patel has neither the experience, the temperament, nor the judgment to lead an agency of 38,000 agencies and 400 field offices around the globe. During the time I've served on this committee, I've had the opportunity to consider 4 FBI director nominations. Each one was a Republican, and I voted for all of them. My concerns about the director of the FBI are not partisan. As much as Republicans claim that President Biden and former Attorney General Garland weaponized the FBI, let's look at the record. President Biden kept the FBI director, a lifelong Republican who'd been appointed by President Trump. Contrast that with President Trump. Fired his first FBI director, James Comey, forced out his second FBI director, Chris Wray, for being insufficiently loyal. With Mr. Patel, however, obviously the president has found a loyalist. Mr. Patel's loyalty includes touting conspiracy theories that threatened efforts at President Trump's enemies. How do we know Mr. Patel's theories, his beliefs, what motivates him, what he really believes? He wrote it in a book. This book, Government Gangsters, I urge all of you to read before you cast a vote for this gentleman. Mr. Patel has published at the back of this book a list of 60 people whom he calls, quote, members of the deep state, 60. This list includes many distinguished public servants who've dedicated their lives to our nation. Among them are Democrats and Republicans, including former Trump administration officials like the former Secretary of Defense Esper. Then there is Mr. Patel's plan to quote, and I quote him, shut down the FBI Hoover building on day one, reopen it the next day as a museum of the deep state. And he has said, quote, we're going to come after people in the media. We're going to come after you. Whether it's criminally or civilly, we're putting you all on notice. Does this sound like the kind of nonpartisan law enforcement professional who should lead the FBI? No, not to me. This is someone who's left behind a trail of grievances throughout his life, lashing out at anyone who disrespects him or doesn't agree with him. Don't take it from me. Listen to these Republicans who worked with him during the Trump's first administration. Attorney General Bill Barr, and I quote, I categorically oppose making Patel deputy FBI director. I said it would happen over my dead body. Patel had virtually no experience that would qualify him to serve at the highest level of the world's preeminent law enforcement agency. National Security Advisor John Bolton. I didn't think he was qualified. He demonstrated no policy aptitude at all. I was forced to hire him. President Trump's Deputy National Security Advisor, Charles Kupperman. The idea that Kash Patel is going to be the FBI director is appalling. His legal career is modest at best. His ideas are ludicrous. CI Director Gina Haspel threatened to resign after President Trump proposed making Mr. Patel CIA Deputy Director. Defense Secretary Mark Esper said Mr. Patel lied about whether Nigeria had approved a hostage rescue operation, putting American lives at risk. But Mr. Patel would have us believe that all of these public servants, all Republicans, all from the first Trump administration, and apparently anyone else who's critical of him, are nothing but government gangsters and deep state members. Many of them have made his list of enemies. Just this week, CNN reported that during the Trump administration, CIA officials referred Mr. Patel to the Justice Department for criminal investigation for sharing classified information without authorization. Last week, I asked the Justice Department and intelligence community for information on any criminal referrals relating to misconduct by Mr. Patel. I have yet to receive a response. Mr. Patel's record is clear. He traffics in debunked conspiracy theories that serve or benefit his political beliefs. Let's start with January 6th, and he dedicates a whole chapter in this book on January 6th. That's something that each and every one of us, as witnesses to January 6th, have our own view of. I'll be grateful always to the Capitol Hill police officers who risked their lives defending me, members of Congress, and visitors to the United States Capitol on that day. Mr. Patel posted on social media, quote, January 6th, never an insurrection. Cowards in uniform exposed. End of quote. Let me repeat that. Cowards in uniform exposed. Who was in the Capitol building on January 6th in a uniform? The Capitol Police were. Do you think they were cowards? Many of them risked their lives and some gave their lives in defense of this building. How about the DC police who were here as well? They were in uniform. Cowards risking their lives as well, some of them being battered and beaten by these mobsters that came into the Capitol. And Mr. Patel claims that the FBI agency aspires to lead, get this now, was planning January 6th for a year. He says the FBI was planning January 6th for a year. That's a quote. Mr. Patel has gone so far as to co-produce and sell musical recordings of a song performed by January 6 rioters in jail, rioters who violently assaulted police officers. He has described this January 6 choir as, quote, political prisoners. Political prisoners. But at least 6 members pleaded guilty to assaulting law enforcement officers on January 6. All 6 have now been pardoned by President Trump. Here are some of those people who received blanket clemency by President Trump on his first day in office in the second term. Julian Cater assaulted Capitol police officers with pepper spray incapacitating 3 officers. Ryan Nichols sprayed pepper spray on multiple police officers. After the attack, Nichols posted on Facebook, and I quote, "So yes, I'm calling for violence and I will be violent." Jordan Mink struck officers, quote, "aggressively with a long pole. He spat at officers and threw large items at them." Armed with a knife, Ronald Sandlin shouted at officers, quote, "You're going to die, get out of the way." Sandlin shoved officers when they tried to lock the doors to the Senate gallery. After breaching the Capitol, James McGrew struck an officer and lunged for his baton. McGrew also threw a wooden handrail with metal brackets at officers. I want to read a sentence from this book on the January 6th experience, just to give you an idea of Mr. Patel's take on what he calls a haphazard riot. By everything we could see, the crowd at the Capitol was unarmed or armed only with non-lethal objects like bottles, flagpoles, or bike racks. Mr. Patel has also peddled conspiracy theories for his own financial benefit, promoting a line of dietary supplements that claim to help people detox from COVID-19 vaccines. During my time on this committee, I was fortunate to get to know and work with former FBI Director Bob Mueller. I met him a few days after 9/11. That's when he took over the FBI. I trusted him, I worked with him, I did everything I could to help him, because I believed that the FBI was a critical central agency in restoring America's confidence that we were safe. Bob Mueller was an extraordinary man. Oh, he was a Republican, make no bones about it. He said it and admitted it, and I knew it. He comes from the San Francisco area. And when he was in college and graduated, a friend of his a year ahead of him had enlisted in the Marine Corps and was killed in Vietnam. Bob was inspired to do the same thing, join up in the Marine Corps, and he did. And he was a first lieutenant in Vietnam. He received a Bronze Star with a Valor Pin, and he also received a Purple Heart. He was injured in battle. I read about his experience because after he was healed from that wound to his leg, he returned to combat. He was just that kind of fella. Regardless of party, he was a real American. He was a longtime federal prosecutor, a U.S. attorney, the head of the DOJ's criminal division, and acting deputy attorney general before he became head of the FBI. After 9/11, I worked with him, and we had a good relationship, a professional relationship. We didn't always see eye to eye, but I respected him so much for what he had given to this country. In this book, Mr. Patel calls Director Bob Mueller, quote, "a swamp creature." With all due respect, Mr. Patel, I've not worn the uniform of this country, and neither have you. To think that you would denigrate Bob Mueller's service to our country and call him a swamp creature is an indication of the depths your political views take you. The FBI plays a critical role in keeping America safe from terrorism, violent crime, and other threats. Our nation needs an FBI director who understands the gravity of this mission and is ready on day one, not someone who is consumed by his own personal political grievances. The American people deserve an FBI director focused on keeping our families safe from terrorism, drug trafficking, and violent crime, not this checklist of grievances we find in this book. Mr. Patel, your record makes it clear you're not that person. I yield.
Thank you, Senator Durbin. Before I call on Senator Tillis, I want to clear up something the way I see it, and I think I'm going to invite everybody that it can be cleared up. This business about what Mr. Patel said about cowards in uniform, it's a mischaracterization of what he actually said. So I'm going to invite you to listen to the interview Mr. Patel gave that linked to his post to hear what he actually said. When he said cowards in uniform, he was talking about senior Pentagon leadership failing to mobilize the National Guard to protect the Capitol. His comments had nothing to do with police. Mr. Patel made his comments while discussing an article in the New York Times exposing grave miscommunication between the Department of Defense and the D.C. National Guard. So I would encourage people to follow up on that. Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, colleagues on the Senate Judiciary Committee. It's my honor to introduce Kash Patel, President Trump's nominee to be FBI Director. I've completed due diligence on his life and career, and I'm convinced that Kash possesses significant expertise and ironclad commitment to justice, and he's an outstanding choice to lead the FBI. Kash's parents are Indian immigrants of Gujarati ancestry. They're up here in the front row. The Gujarat state is a melting pot of religions, including Hinduism, Islam, Jainism, with temples, mosques, and other religious sites scattered across the state. His father was raised in Uganda, but his family had to flee the country to escape repression under Idi Amin. His mother was born in Tanzania. They met and married in India and ultimately made their way to New York City by way of Canada, where his parents, along with 7 brothers and sisters and their spouses and at least a half a dozen kids, lived under the same roof. His parents raised Kash in the Hindu faith, and they instilled in him the values of hard work and education. Kash is a devout Hindu, and consistent with his faith, he's shown respect to people of all faiths. Kash attended the University of Richmond, where he earned his bachelor's degree in criminal justice and history. He went to Pace University School of Law, where he earned his JD, and an international law certificate from the University College of London, Faculty of Laws. Kash began his career as a public defender in Florida, where he led or co-led more than 60 jury trials in state and federal court. Kash clearly demonstrated a devotion to upholding the rule of law and defending the rights of individuals. Kash led the defense of Jose Buitrago in United States versus Buitrago, a high-profile case in Florida in 2015. Buitrago was one of the Colombian nationals arrested in a major drug bust involving Operation Backrim. Kash and his co-counsel successfully argued that key evidence was withheld by the prosecution, leading to Buitrago's release. I suspect some of Kash's disdain for prosecutorial misconduct stemmed from this experience. Kash was hired as a senior counsel on the House Permanent Select Subcommittee on Intelligence Committee, I should say, in 2017. He told me he distinctly remembers my friend Trey Gowdy comment shortly after they were introduced. He said in Trey's dialect, "Kash, Congress is where righteous investigations go to die. I hope you're ready." I think Kash was ready, and he went on to establish a solid reputation for pursuing the facts, and from there, he held senior posts at the NSC, the Department of Defense, and the DNI. Since leaving the administration in 2020, Kash has written articles and books on national security, law, and governance. Through his work as an author, Kash continues to advocate for justice and transparency, and to be ever vigilant in defending our great democracy and the rule of law. Colleagues, I created a Kash bingo card that I have available to any of my colleagues who would like it on the other side of the aisle. Some may view this as an unserious caricature and not appropriate for this committee. Sadly, I consider it a serious caricature of what I expect to be witnessed today. I think we'll have words like enemies list and deep state. I've already X'd out 4 boxes in the opening statements alone. The fact of the matter is, some people will be here to simply substantiate a false narrative. At worst, they may be just going through an unfounded litany of quotes and half-truths, some of which have already been dispelled by the chairman after the opening statements. Mr. Chair and Ranking Member, in my 10 years in the Senate, I hope I've established a reputation for being fair, doing my homework, and taking tough positions that have been met with harsh criticism. Heck, I've even been censured by my entire state and 30 counties for taking tough positions. And I stand by those decisions today and my decision to support Kash Patel. When President Trump announced his intent to nominate Kash, I contacted Trey Gowdy and others who worked with Kash, and they gave me glowing recommendations. So I called Kash on December the 2nd, and I offered to help him with his nomination. Since then, we have spent hours together, in person and on the phone. I've asked him difficult questions, and I've urged him to reach out to members across the aisle. In fact, Kash Patel has met with 60 members of the U.S. Senate, every member except the last 3 who were sworn in, and the majority of the members on the other side of the dais in this committee and members off the committee. Chair Grassley, Ranking Member Durbin, friends and colleagues on the committee, I've completed my due diligence of Kash Patel, and I am honored to provide my strongest recommendation for his confirmation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that introduction. Before I swear you, I want to make clear that before you give your statement, if you want to introduce family and friends in the audience, you're welcome to do that. Would you please stand? Raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give to the committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. You may proceed.
Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Durbin, and members of the Judiciary Committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear today. I must start with a word of prayer for the tragic accident that befell our nation last night, where we lost civilians and service members. I pray for their families. I pray for law enforcement and military personnel, and I pray for their souls, and hopefully God will find them peace in the near future. I'd like to welcome my father, Pramod, and my mother, Anjana, who are sitting here today. They traveled here to get here from India. My sister's also here, Nisha. She also traversed the oceans just to be with me here today. It means the world that you guys are here. Jesse Krishna. I wouldn't be here today without their guidance, their unwavering support, and their relentless love. When President Trump informed me of his intention to nominate me as the director of the FBI, I was deeply honored. Sitting here today, I carry not only the dreams of my parents, but also the hopes of millions of Americans who stand for justice, fairness, and the rule of law. My commitment to these principles is deeply rooted in my family's history, which has profoundly shaped my worldview. My father fled Idi Amin's genocidal dictatorship in Uganda, where 300,000 men, women, and children were killed based on their ethnicity, just because they happen to look like me. My mother is originally from Tanzania. She studied in India, as did my dad, and they were married there. They would later emigrate to New York, as the senator pointed out, where I was born, and we were raised in a household of my father's 7 siblings, their spouses, and at least half a dozen children. That's the only way we knew how to do things at the time, in the 70s and 80s, the Indian way. But we would soon learn the American way. These values have shaped and been the driving force of my career in 16 years of government service. Protecting the rights of the Constitution is of the utmost importance to me and has been every single time I've taken that oath of office. The recent terrorist attacks in New Orleans tragically claimed the lives of 14 innocent Americans and serve as a stark reminder that our national security is at threat, both internally and externally. The FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Department of Justice, where I served, play a pivotal role in securing our freedoms and our safeties for American citizens. If confirmed as the next FBI director, I will remain focused on the FBI's core mission. That is to investigate fully wherever there is a constitutional factual basis to do so, and to never make a prosecutorial decision that is solely the providence of the Department of Justice and the Attorney General. For the first 8 years after law school, I served as a public defender, first for Miami-Dade County and later for the Southern District of Florida. During that time, I represented some pretty awful human beings charged with some pretty heinous crimes. But what I learned there was the core value that has been enshrined in me since, that due process must be provided without bias to all Americans. And if we cannot provide due process to the worst, then there can be no due process for anyone, and our constitutional republic fails. But I battled on that hill for that due process. I would later serve in the Obama Justice Department as a terrorism prosecutor in the National Security Division, where we successfully contributed to the prosecutions of terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, and others. I was honored to receive the 2017 Assistant Attorney General's Award from Loretta Lynch for my work in helping the Ugandans bring members of Al-Shabaab to justice for murdering 74 innocent people, including an American. I would also receive the Human Intelligence Award from the intelligence community for related work on that mission. My experiences at the National Security Division and would later be followed by my experiences on the National Security Council as Senior Director for Counterterrorism, and later as the Deputy Director of National Intelligence responsible for the production, creation, and promulgation of the Presidential Daily Briefing, our nation's most sensitive classified information and secrets to protect our country. My time in the White House was preceded by my time right here in Congress as a staffer on the House Intelligence Committee, where I spearheaded the investigation that exposed serious FISA, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act abuses by members of the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. That misconduct eroded the public trust in our FBI. The erosion of trust, as Chairman Grassley pointed out, is all too low today. 40% of Americans have trust in the FBI. In order to get it back, there's a twofold track, Senator. One, violent crime is exploding in this country, and we cannot afford them to allow it to run away. We must tackle violent crime. Just in 2023 alone, there was 100,000 rapes, 100,000 drug overdoses, and 17,000 homicides. The priority of the FBI, if I'm confirmed, will be to ensure that our communities are protected and safeguarded and our children have parks to play in and not needles to walk over. The way we do this, we let good cops be cops. We let law enforcement, and we provide them with the tools necessary and resources they need to get after violent crime. The second way we do this on equal track is aggressive constitutional oversight from Congress. The public trust can only be restored if there is full transparency, and I am committed to that full transparency. Members of Congress have unfortunately submitted hundreds of questions that have been unanswered by the FBI in recent times. That will not occur if I am confirmed. All appropriate requests for information will be responded to expeditiously and fully. I'm committed to working alongside the dedicated men and women of the FBI. They are warriors of justice, and I will always have their backs because they have the backs of the American people. I look forward to answering your questions, and I want to take a moment to thank my family, my friends, people who traveled here, and my entire team that has made this day possible. God bless America, and I look forward to your questions.
Seven minutes first round, is that right? 7 minutes for 3 minutes the second round. Mr. Patel, I'm not going to go through all the things that you've done through your career because I said those in my opening statements, but Democrats on the committee say you don't have experience. What are you most proud of from your career in public service?
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the question. It's really humbling to be afforded the opportunity to have served this country for 16 years. But I think what I'm most proud of is my work in national security, protecting the no-fail mission returning American hostages, killing high-value terrorists that brought hate and destruction to our shores. I've served that mission in Democratic and Republican administrations, and it is the one mission that we cannot fail, and it is the one mission where the FBI must play a critical role.
Okay. As you well know, and you and I discussed this in my office, whistleblowers are critical to rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. Their courage to come forward and make legally protected disclosures about government wrongdoing benefits the country. I think they're politically, they are good American citizens, just want the government to do what it's supposed to do. I think they're treated by bureaucracies, not just in the FBI, but throughout the bureaucracy, like skunks at a picnic. Will you protect whistleblowers from retaliation, unlike former Director Wray, and promote a culture at the FBI that values whistleblowers' important contributions?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. I share in your beliefs about the importance of whistleblowers.
So we've spent a lot of taxpayers' money ruining whistleblowers. Will you commit to ensuring that no taxpayer money will be used to identify and retaliate against whistleblowers?
Senator, if I'm confirmed, it will not.
Okay. You and I have heard a lot of criticism about various statements about January 6th. You said, quote, those who broke actual laws should be prosecuted, end of quote. But you've also called out the partisan nature of prosecutions and compared how the Biden Justice Department treated January 6th defenders with how they ignored many other crimes. Those include crimes related to illegal immigration, as well as riots that took place around the country. So explain your position on January 6th to this committee, and how do you respond to critics who say that you're anti-law enforcement?
Mr. Chairman, I greatly appreciate the question, the opportunity to discuss that. If anyone wants to consider me as anti-law enforcement, then look at my 16 years in government service, whether I was trying 60 jury trials in state and federal court upholding the rights of the indigent and breathing life into constitutional due process, or later as a national security prosecutor, where I served this country and overseas, and later when I was a Joint Special Operations Command civilian embedded with SEAL Team 6 and Delta, chasing down some of the most high-value target terrorists there are on this earth and successfully achieving a mission end state. I have always respected law enforcement. I have taken that oath and will take that oath again, God willing, to be the next director of the FBI. As for January 6th, I have repeatedly, often, publicly, and privately said there can never be a tolerance for violence against law enforcement. And anyone that commits an act of violence against law enforcement must be investigated, prosecuted, and imprisoned. And on January 6th, I said the same thing about acts against law enforcement. The Capitol Police, who I have served with, and when I was Chief of Staff at the Department of Defense, rushing to the aid of the members of this committee and your colleagues to provide the National Guard, was my top mission priority, not politics. And that is my love of this country, to protect our laws and our way of life. And it was no different. If there's any ever corruption, I have been the first to call it out. And I will continue to call out corruption in government service, because it is a privilege to serve this nation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Outside of this committee, and some people on this committee have accused you of promoting the QAnon movement. My colleagues have already asked your future boss, Mr. Bondi, many questions about this. I think it's easy to see these attacks for what they are, guilt by association. Are you a follower or promoter of QAnon?
No, Senator. In fact, I have publicly, including in the interviews provided to this committee, rejected outright QAnon baseless conspiracy theories or any other baseless conspiracy theories. They must be addressed head on with the truth, and I will continue to do that. And I will always continue to support Americans who support law enforcement, our military, and want a secure border.
Over the past 4 years, the FBI and Justice Department have weaponized law enforcement towards partisan ends. This has affected you personally. You, along with even members of my staff, were the victims of FBI overreach when they secretly subpoenaed your records during the investigation into Crossfire Hurricane. Inspector General Horowitz of Justice Department was right to say actions like this have a quote, unquote, chilling effect on whistleblowers. How do you intend to make sure that this kind of misconduct never happens again?
Senator, this may be one of the scenarios that most uniquely qualifies me to take command at the FBI. Having been the victim of government overreach and a weaponized system of justice and law enforcement, I know what it feels like to have the full weight of the United States government barreling down on you. And as the Biden Inspector General determined, those activities by the FBI and DOJ were wholly improper and not predicated upon law and facts. I will ensure, if confirmed, that no American is subjected to that kind of torment, to that kind of cost, financially and personally. And most importantly, I will make sure that no American is subjected to death threats like I was, and subjected to moving their residences like I was, because of government overreach, because of leaks of information about my personal status. If confirmed as FBI director, Mr. Chairman, you have my commitment that no one in this country will feel that pain.
Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Patel, I woke up this morning to National Public Radio, and they had an item on there about what has happened to those who were given blanket clemency by President Trump. One of these individuals was a man named Matthew Huddle. Are you familiar with him?
I'm sorry, what was the last name?
Matthew Huddle.
If you could remind me, Senator.
Well, I was reminded again this morning. He's a man who's been found guilty of numerous crimes. The one described this morning was an outrageous situation where he beat his 3-year-old child to a point where the poor kid couldn't even sit down for a week. Mr. Huddle was one of the demonstrators who came to the Capitol on January 6th. He was incarcerated and charged with, and pled guilty to crimes that he had committed, violence against police officers. After he was released by President Trump, he returned to his home state of Indiana. A few days later, he was stopped on the road, pulled a gun on a policeman. The policeman, sheriff's deputy, turned, shot, and killed him. This is not the only instance of a person who received President Trump's clemency committing another crime. Peter Schwartz was mentioned this morning on the radio. 38 criminal convictions, 38. He'd been sentenced to 14 years in prison. He was released because of the president's unconditional clemency, which was given to him as well. So I guess my question is this. Was President Donald Trump wrong to give blanket clemency to the January 6 defendants?
Thank you, Ranking Member. A couple of things on that. One, the power of the presidential pardon is just that, the president.
Well, I concede he has the authority. I'm asking, was he wrong to do it?
And as we discussed in our private meeting, Senator, I have always rejected any violence against law enforcement, and I have, including in that group, is specifically addressed any violence against law enforcement on January 6th, and I do not agree with the commutation of any sentence of any individual who committed violence against law enforcement.
So do you think that America is safer because the 1,600 people have been given an opportunity to come out of serving their sentences and live in our communities again?
Senator, I have not looked at all 1,600 individual cases. I have always advocated for imprisoning those that cause harm to our law enforcement and civilian communities. I also believe America is not safer because President Biden's commutation of a man who murdered 2 FBI agents, Agent Kohler's and Williams' family, deserve better than to have the man that point blank range fired a shotgun into their heads and murdered them released from prison. So it goes both ways.
Leonard Pelletier was in prison for 45 years. He's 80 years old, and he was sentenced to home confinement. So he's not free, as you might have just suggested.
He killed 2 FBI agents.
That's true, he did, and he went to prison for it and should have. My question to you, though, is do you think America is safer because President Trump issued these pardons to 1,600 of these criminal defendants, many of whom violently assaulted our police in the Capitol?
Senator, America will be safe when we don't have 200,000 drug overdoses in 2 years. America will be safe when we
you're
don't have
not gonna answer the
50 homicides in a day.
So you just won't answer the question.
I
I'm
am
going to say,
here.
I don't think we're safer. Matthew Huddle was sent back to Indiana. I don't think we're safer with Peter Schwartz. I could go through a long list of individuals, some of who are wanted in states, members of this committee. Let me move to another topic if I can. Tell me about your J6 choir. What is that?
Well, it's not my choir. It's simply a recording that was utilized to raise funds for families in need of nonviolent offenders.
Who sings on this recording?
I don't know, Senator.
What did you have to do with it?
Simply to raise funds to assist families of nonviolent offenders whose kids needed college education payments and whose rent needed being paid.
My understanding is that the performers on this J6 choir were the rioters who are in prison.
I'm not aware of that, sir. I didn't have anything to do with the recording.
You weren't aware of who made the recording?
No, Senator.
That's interesting. Did you receive any money for selling copies of that music or that recording?
Absolutely not.
Okay. You do have a foundation, though, do you not?
I'm very proud of the Kash Foundation and the $1.3 million we've given to families in need across this country, including active duty service members, police officers, putting kids in college, and helping people in disaster relief areas rebuild their homes and their communities.
1&0 LLC, are you familiar with that?
Sorry?
1&0 LLC?
I believe, Senator, you're referring to the LLC that one of the individuals has his private business with.
Is it part of the Kash Foundation in any way?
Only in that one of the members of the board has that LLC for his outside business.
Andrew Hollis?
I believe that's his name, yes.
Yes. Do you know how much was paid to him from your charitable work?
Yes, like any other charity, we had to go out and fundraise, something I'm sure every member of this committee is familiar with. And we used digital marketing campaigns, and I believe we paid a digital marketing company through 1&0 $250,000 to raise $500,000, which we gave away to families in need, like when hurricanes struck Florida, Texas, and North Carolina.
We will be going through the details of your foundation and the expenditures with the questions for record that the chairman has mentioned.
I look forward to
a chance to answer those under oath. Mr. Patel, you frequently associated with and sometimes praised extremist figures with well-documented histories of racism, anti-Semitism, conspiracies, and the like. In September of 2023, you appeared with Laura Loomer at an event promoting your book, this one here. You shared a photo of yourself and Loomer in which you held her book and she held yours. Just a few months before this event, Ms. Loomer posted on X that the September 11 terrorist attacks were, quote, an inside job. Around that time, she accused Florida's First Lady, Casey DeSantis, of exaggerating her cancer diagnosis to gain voter sympathy. A number of my Republican colleagues on this committee have criticized Ms. Loomer's extremism. One of my colleagues described her as a, quote, crazy conspiracy theorist who regularly utters disgusting garbage. Another called her really toxic. Given all of this, why did you associate with Ms. Loomer?
Senator, as you can see, I took a photograph with an individual who showed up at a book event. I don't believe I'm guilty by association, and I certainly don't believe that an individual who was the first minority to serve as the Deputy Director of National Intelligence for this country is a racist in any way, and I detest any conjecture to the contrary.
You familiar with the Stu Peters? Does that name ring a bell?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you familiar with Mr. Stu Peters?
Not off the top of my head.
He made 8 separate appearances on his podcast. He promoted outrageous conspiracy theories and worked with a prominent neo-Nazi. There are more, Ted Nugent, it goes on, list goes on. I'm just asking, when it comes to your association with individuals, why are so many of them in this category?
My association, as you loosely define it, is by appearing in media over 1,000 times to take on people who are putting on conspiratorial theories and to devour them of their false impressions and to talk to them about the truth. That is something that I will always continue to fight for, Senator.
Senator Graham.
Thank you. We'll eventually talk about the FBI. That's the job you're up here for, right? Have you ever been subject to racism as an individual?
Unfortunately, Senator, yes. I don't want to get into those details with my family here.
Oh, let's get into a few of them. Tell me about it.
Well, if you look at the record from January 6th, where I testified before that committee, because of my personal information being released by Congress, I was subjected to a direct and significant threat on my life. And I put that information in the record. I had to move. In that threat, I was called a detestable, and I'll apologize if I don't get it all right, but it's in the record, a detestable sand nigger who had no right being in this country. You should go back to where you came from. You belong with your terrorist home friends. That's what was sent to me. That's just a piece of it. But that's nothing compared to what the men and women in law enforcement face every day. And that's why they have my support.
Okay. Growing up, were you subject to racism?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, I think the reason you're here has a lot to do with your work on Crossfire Hurricane. Are you familiar with that FBI operation?
I am, Senator.
So Senator Durbin mentioned the church report and the history of abuse, but he failed to mention Crossfire Hurricane. He failed to mention the Horowitz report. Wonder why? If you're waiting for these guys over here to figure that out, you're going to die waiting. So this is the Nunes memo. You work for Mr. Nunes over on the House side? David Nunes?
Sorry?
Are you familiar with this memo by the Foreign Intelligence Service Act abuses
Yes.
the Department of Justice?
Absolutely.
Did you help write this memo?
I did as a staffer.
Okay, I'm going to put this in the record.
Thank you.
In this memo, you kind of dissected the abuses of Crossfire Hurricane, right?
I did, Senator.
And the Mueller investigation. So the Crossfire Hurricane investigators, two of them were Strzok and Page. Are you familiar with them?
I am, Senator.
Okay. It was opened up on July the 31st, 2016. And here's what Strzok said. And damn, this feels momentous because this matters. The other one did too, but that was to ensure we didn't F something up. This matters because this matters. So super glad to be on this voyage with you. That's to Page. And Page responds a couple of months later, he's not ever going to be President right, talking about Trump. Strzok, no, he won't. We'll stop it. Is it fair to say that the people in charge of investigating Crossfire Hurricane hated Trump's guts?
Well, you don't have to take my word for it. That statement, along with the statements from the sources.
Are
during that
those days
operations-
over in the FBI, you hope?
Well, if they're not, they will be.
Okay, good. You know who Carter Page was?
I do, Senator.
Do you know that the FBI secured warrants against him on 4 different occasions?
Yes, Senator.
Do you know that the information that they relied upon came from the Steele dossier?
I do.
Was it you that were able to find out that the Steele dossier was a bunch of crap?
Yes, Senator. We followed the money and we exposed the fraud that was the Steele dossier.
And the primary subsource was Igor Danchenko, right?
That's correct, Senator.
And he was actually a Russian analyst.
That's right.
Are you aware that in January he told the FBI that, let's see, what did he tell the FBI? Steele had no proof to support the statements, then it was just talk. The primary subsource explained to the FBI that his information came from word of mouth and hearsay, conversations he had with friends over beers, and some of the information were statements he heard made in jest. And he told the FBI this in January.
That's
of
right.
2017. And they got 2 more warrants after that.
That's correct.
Are you aware that the FBI had volumes information that the Steele dossier was a bunch of bullshit and nobody ever told anybody at the top.
I am, sir. We exposed.
Or they lied about being told.
That's correct.
So are you aware of the fact that the FISA court rebuked the FBI? Are you aware of the fact that an FBI lawyer went to jail because he misled the court by manipulating a email from the CIA?
I am.
Do you believe that Crossfire Hurricane was one of the most disgusting episodes in FBI history of a corrupt investigation led by corrupt people who wanted to take Donald Trump down?
Yes, sir.
You think that's why you're in this chair today, to fix that?
I think that's a big part of the
Without
reason.
Crossfire Hurricane, this guy wouldn't be here. And my friends on the other side, like pulling teeth, the Horowitz investigation, the Inspector General labeled this fraudulent at its core, mismanaged at its core, running stop signs. At every turn, they went forward when they should have stopped. The Durham report said it was obviously politically motivated. FBI agents were telling anybody and everybody that would listen, this is not reliable, this is not trustworthy, but they plowed on. And because of you and Trey Gowdy and others, we now know about this. Everybody who signed the warrant under questioning by me said if they knew then what they know now, they wouldn't have signed the warrant. Comey said that. Yates said that. Rosenstein said that. The reason you're here is because most of the public, almost every Republican believes that the FBI has been used continuously in a political fashion, ignoring evidence, making up evidence, lying to get Donald Trump. And when it came to the Hunter Biden laptop, they told every social media outlet in October 2020, oh, that's Russian disinformation. That was BS too. Right before the election, the FBI intervened to shut reporting on the Hunter laptop down as being Russian misinformation, according to Zuckerberg. Do you promise all of us those days are over at the FBI?
Yes, Senator, they are.
Are you proud of what you did to find all that?
Absolutely.
You think that's why you're here today, is to make sure that never happens again?
The American people deserve just that.
Thank you.
Senator Whitehouse. Thanks, Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Patel. I remember January 6th. Colleagues running through our halls to flee the mob, colleagues shouting that rioters should be shot, us returning to our constitutional business through hallways cleared for us by automatic weapons carrying SWAT teams. None of you, none of us, said those violent rioters should be pardoned. A Republican colleague said such pardons would be hard to believe, even absurd. Your former colleague, J.D. Vance, said the violent rioters should not be pardoned. Even Jim Jordan said pardons would, and I quote, focus on all the people who didn't commit any violence. Well, Trump pardoned all of them. And there's a lesson in that. Every time you think Trump would never go that far, rethink that. We all seem to agree that violence against police is unacceptable, yet more than 600 people who physically attacked Capitol Police officers were just put back on the street, part of a 1,500-person personal Trump army, now out there with people who have proven themselves willing to do violence on Trump's call. In only 10 days, some are already back committing crimes. We've also tried as a committee together to address the dangers of illicit drug sales over the internet, and I assume we're all against murder for hire. But Trump also just pardoned a dark web operator sentenced to life in prison for trafficking illegal drugs online and accused of soliciting murders for hire. Those pardons, as Mr. Patel has said, are a mistake, but they are also a signal. that we are entering a strange and dangerous time. That is the context for today's hearing. Warnings that the FBI could become Trump's enforcer, use the powers of law enforcement to stifle speech and dissent, punish political rivals of either party, and hand out free passes, get out of jail free cards to violent supporters are warnings we should heed. Here are some warnings of this nominee's Trump administration colleagues. Former Attorney General Bill Barr said, "This nominee has virtually no experience that would qualify him to serve at the highest level of the world's preeminent law enforcement agency," end quote, "and we would never be able to command the respect necessary to run the day-to-day operations of the Bureau." That's for the deputy position. Former CIA Director Gina Haspel was reported threatening to resign rather than have this nominee serve under her. John Bolton, Trump's former national security advisor, said, "I didn't think he was qualified. I was forced to hire him." Trump's deputy national security advisor, the nominee's former supervisor, said, "His ideas are ludicrous. He's absolutely unqualified for this job. He's untrustworthy. And it's an absolute disgrace to even consider an individual of this nature." That's from Republican appointees who worked with him. And here's what this nominee himself has said about using his office to prosecute journalists. "We will go out and find the conspirators, not just in government, but in the media. We're gonna come after you, whether it's criminally or civilly." Is that a correct quotation, Mr. Patel?
Senator, that's a partial quotation.
But it's correct.
In part.
Regarding his publication of his enemies list, Mr. Patel proclaimed, "The manhunt starts tomorrow," and reposted a video depicting him taking a chainsaw to his political enemies. Is that you, Kash Patel, reposting that at the top of that page?
Senator, I had nothing to do with the creation of that meme.
Is that you reposting it, was my question.
And that's me at the top.
You said FBI agents were responsible for the violence on January 6th, and I quote you here, "beyond a reasonable doubt." Is that what you said?
That's completely incorrect, and I appreciate the opportunity to address that.
I'll give you an opportunity in writing, but this is my time now.
Have at it.
An Inspector Attorney General investigation found that that was false. And you said we should impeach judges who rule against Donald Trump, who are, in your words, political terrorists. When this nominee tries to explain all this away, keep one thing in mind. He's testified under oath before a Colorado judge who presided over a Trump case in which he was a witness. And the judge found, and I'm quoting here, he was not a credible witness. His testimony is not only illogical, but completely devoid of any evidence in the record. That's from a judge. This is a dangerous time, and I ask all my colleagues to consider whether these plain comments by this person and by his own Trump administration colleagues should be given a blind eye, just overlooked, or whether, like the warnings of pardoning violent January 6 offenders, they're warnings to be heeded. There is an unfathomable difference between a seeming facade being constructed around this nominee here today and what he has actually done and said in real life when left to his own devices. Conduct shows character. And if you look at history, you see the danger of security chiefs in authoritarian regimes becoming the tools of political power. The characteristics that they often show are that they are vengeful, that they are grandiose, that they are intemperate, that they are partisan and blindly loyal, and that they are servile and won't say no. I'm afraid that the history of this nominee's conduct raises those warnings. And I yield my 1 second back.
Before Senator Cornyn, you said you'd like to explain something. I forget the point he made. You can do that now if you want to.
Simply this, Senator. In the collective, all of those statements are taken out of grotesque context. And anyone that thinks my 16 years of service isn't exemplary on how I would proceed if confirmed as FBI is intentionally putting false information into the public ether and creating more public discourse. The only thing that will matter if I'm confirmed as a director of the FBI is a de-weaponized, depoliticized system of law enforcement completely devoted to rigorous obedience of the Constitution and a singular standard of justice.
Before I call on Senator Cornyn, I'd like to say that we've heard about the January 6th pardons. I think it's important that we remind people at the same time of some pardons by the previous administration. Thomas Sanders, a kidnapper who murdered a 12-year-old girl named Lexus and her mother, Swellen Roberts. Adrian Peeler, a Connecticut drug kingpin who was convicted in the death of an 8-year-old boy and his mother. Leonard Peltier, that's already been referred to, that murdered 2 FBI agents. And even Director Wray, at that time, former Director Wray, said that that shouldn't have happened. And Judge Michael Conahan, who took kickbacks for wrongly sending juveniles for profit detention centers, and Alex Saab, who laundered illicit proceeds for narcotics terrorists, Nicolas Maduro, and was a key connection between Venezuela and Iran, and 5 family members of his own family. President Biden did that. Senator Cornyn.
Welcome, Mr. Patel. Do you believe America is an exceptional nation?
It's the greatest nation.
Your family went through a lot to get here.
They sure did.
And your life story is, I think, a great example of people pursuing the American dream. Do you believe a large part of what makes America an exceptional nation is the rule of law?
It is one of the fundamental precepts that determines that.
And why is that?
Because without a singular application of a rule of law, we go back to the Uganda that my father fled in Idi Amin.
I believe that the 2 most important institutions in America to preserve and protect and enforce the rule of law are the FBI and the Department of Justice. And the sort of politicalization that Senator Graham and others have already talked about during the Crossfire Hurricane investigation or project of James Comey at the FBI, and the abuse of intelligence tools like Title I of Section 702 are a betrayal of American values and adherence to the rule of law. And I think your biggest task is going to be, along with Pam Bondi at the Office of the Attorney General, is to restore the rule of law to the Department of Justice and the FBI. Are you willing to do that?
Absolutely, Senator.
Without regard to partisan affiliation or politics?
Absolutely.
Do you believe President Trump, as the commander-in-chief, needs access to all of the lawfully available intelligence that can be collected by the American intelligence community in order to inform him so that he can make good judgments as Commander-in-Chief to assure the safety and security of the American people?
Having been responsible for the collection and predication and promulgation of that intelligence, I firmly believe he and every president must have it.
And so you would not support any impractical or perhaps immaterial or unworkable ways to inhibit the flow of that information to President Trump?
No, I would not.
So let me just ask you, you and I have talked about this a number of times, and this has come up before in a number of different contexts. But as I've always said, I think Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act is the most important law that most Americans have never heard of. Yeah. But when I was questioning my fellow Texan, John Ratcliffe, who now has been confirmed as the director of the CIA, about this, we talked about some of the reforms that have been made to Section 702 over the years. This has been an ongoing conversation here in Congress. People like my colleague here, Senator Lee, and others have proposed reforms, which I think have gone a long way to help protect the privacy rights of American citizens. But let me just point out some of the improvements that have been made over the years. This is not the same 702 that was in effect during President Trump's first terms. These are a number of things that we did together on a bipartisan basis to make sure that the balance between the national security interests of the American people and the privacy and constitutional rights of American citizens were protected. Do you agree with that?
Yes, Senator, I do.
And I think Senator Tillis, with his typical outstanding graphics, has a wonderful handout which lays all of that out. But one of the things that's come up, and we've discussed this, is the idea that in order to query lawfully collected intelligence under Section 702, that somehow if a U.S. person's name is involved, that a warrant would be required. Now, you're a lawyer who's represented defendants as a public defender. You understand that what probable cause is required, what sort of evidence is required to be produced to a judge in order to get a warrant. Do you believe a warrant requirement is a practical and workable or even a necessary element of 702?
If I may just give some context on that, Senator. Having a background not only utilizing FISA and 702 as a national security prosecutor, but as a civilian at JSOC and later as an intelligence official and the Deputy Director of National Intelligence, 702 collection formulates over 45% of the presidential daily briefing that you referred to earlier.
I actually have heard it's as high as 60%, but anyway, it's a lot.
It's a lot. And the issue for me is not with FISA and 702. The issue has been those that have been in government service and abused it in the past. And so we must work with Congress to provide the protections necessary for American citizens. Dealing with these matters, including hostage rescue operations in real time, which we use FISA collection to find and save American hostages, having a warrant requirement to go through that information in real time is just not comportive with the requirement to protect American citizenry. I'm all open to working with Congress on finding a better way forward, but right now, these improvements that you've made go a long way.
Well, and Director Ratcliffe said that he did not believe that, given the context of 702 collection, whether a foreign target communicates with a U.S. person, that there'd be sufficient evidence to go to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court or any other court to demonstrate probable cause. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, just in real time, Senator, excuse me, it's almost impossible to make that function and serve the national no-fail mission.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you point out the lack of trust. Any of these tools can be abused by people who are willing to break the law or abuse these tools or violate the public trust. Director Ratcliffe again used, I thought, a helpful analogy. I'll see if you agree with it. He said, the knives in your kitchen have a very useful and beneficial purpose, but they too can be misused do you agree with that?
Absolutely, Senator.
And similarly, do you agree that tools like Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act can be used appropriately to protect national security, but they can also be abused by people who are willing to cross a line they should not cross?
They're both true, and that's why we need to work together to make sure Americans have trust again in these surveillance measures that we utilize to protect our country.
Thank you.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Patel, I think you know that I have great respect for the men and women of the FBI, their mission, fidelity, bravery, integrity. I believe they deserve a director who respects our work and sacrifices, and they deserve a director who's focused on their mission. This is not about bingo cards or games. This is not about revenge. This is about the safety of our country and the people that work in the FBI. And the FBI runs on facts, it runs on truth. Truth matters, and without truth, the whole system breaks down. You said that Donald Trump has every right to tell the world that in 2020, 2016, and every other election in between was rigged by our government because they were. Yes or no, did you say that?
I don't have that statement in front of me. But
okay, that was from August 27th, 2023 Thrive Time show. I'll put it on the record. These claims made in that statement were rejected by courts, including by Republican judges. Is that correct?
I don't have enough of the facts in front of me to make that assessment.
I will put that statement on the record, but I think everyone in this committee, including the Republican members, knows that these statements were rejected by courts. You were asked about the police officers in the Capitol who testified in the January 6 hearings, and you accused them of lying. Is that correct or not correct?
I don't think that's accurate.
Okay, Joe Pack's podcast, March 2024, we'll put it on the record. I was there. The police officers were heroes that day.
Yes.
Did you post on your personal social media account in May of 2024, January 6th, never an insurrection, cowards in uniforms exposed. They broke the chain of command.
I believe you're referencing a post that was shown in part earlier. I don't have it in front of me.
You posted it, and it was on your account, and we will again put that out there once more as we go on. I don't want to lose any more time on this, but every one of these, there's a record of it, and you haven't answered. You promoted a COVID vaccine reversal or detox supplement. One scientist said, I quote, "None of these substances in any form would minimize side effects from a COVID-19 vaccine." That is preying on innocent people. Did you perform clinical trials before you made that claim?
I'm not a doctor, so no.
But you did promote this supplement and told people that it would reverse or mitigate the side effects from COVID vaccine.
Did I give people an opportunity to make an independent choice for what's best for their families? Yes.
You did that last year, correct?
I don't have it in front of me again, Senator.
Mr. Patel, the FBI tackles some of the most complex threats that we face: terrorists, hostile foreign powers, violent gangs, fentanyl, criminal organizations. Your mission, though, has been to go after people. I've looked at it. I've read this stuff. Yes or no? When Trump wins, did you say this? When Trump wins in 2024 and is in power in 2025, we can prosecute them, referring to Justice Department officials for an actual RICO statute violation, for criminally organizing the United States government to break the law to rig presidential elections. Did you say that, yes or no?
Again, Senator, you're reading a partial statement, so I'm unable to fully respond.
Okay, again, we'll put it on the record. X22 report podcast 20, that is from, I'll get you the date, about a year ago. One of the names on your list was Bill Barr. Chairman Grassley has called him one of the most capable cabinet officials I've ever been able to vote for. Senator Graham has said, I have nothing but total respect and admiration for the job done by William Barr as Attorney General of the United States. Is Bill Barr on your list of whatever you want to call them, been referred to as an enemies list. You've called them deep state after serving his country as the Attorney General of the United States. Is he on your list because of a personal vendetta?
Well, it's not whatever we want to call it, Senator. With all due respect, it's not an enemies list. That is a total mischaracterization.
I asked you,
And-
I actually used the words you used for the list, which was deep state, right? That's what you put at the
It is
top.
a glossary
Against
in
the
the
Attorney
back.
General of the United States. Is it because of a personal vendetta that he's on the list? You're under oath.
I have no personal vendetta against Bill
Okay,
Barr.
he said about you, you would never be able to command the respect necessary to run the day-to-day operations of the Bureau. That was actually in writing in his book. He had virtually, about you, no experience that would qualify you to serve at the highest level of the world's preeminent law enforcement agency, and that your appointment, as noted by Senator Durbin as Deputy Director to the FBI, would happen over his dead body. Is it, yes or no, why you would put him on the list of deep state as a former Attorney General, Trump Attorney General of the United States, because he wouldn't break the law for Donald Trump? Is that why?
Absolutely not.
As you know, he repeatedly told the president in no uncertain terms that he did not see evidence of fraud that would have affected the outcome of the election. Did you say in February of 2021 that the election stuff was never my job and I stayed out of that stuff?
Again, I don't know what comment you're referring to, but I'm sure you're reading a piece of something.
You said it on Pushback on a podcast. Is it true, though, that in December of 2020, you reached out to the Trump acting Deputy Attorney General and asked him to investigate a conspiracy theory claiming that people in Italy had used military technology and satellites to remotely tamper with voting machines in the U.S. and switch votes for Trump from Trump to Biden? Is that true?
What was the date?
That was out of December of 2020.
I was Chief of Staff to the Department of Defense, so I don't believe that's accurate in any way.
Okay, that came out of testimony before Congress. I will give it to you. Have you referred to the media as the most powerful enemy of the United States that they have ever seen? Is that right?
Again, you're reading a quote. I take that you're reading it accurately.
CPAC 22324. You said we're going to come after the people in the media who lied about American citizens who helped Joe Biden rig the elections. We're going to come after you whether it's criminally or civilly. Is that something you said?
That's a partial statement of what I said.
Steve Bannon's podcast. You also said you would put the entire fake news mafia press corps on your list. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
I don't have that in front of me.
Benny Johnson's podcast, 82123. You have said that the FBI, including today, you said that they remain utterly corrupt. This is an agency with agents who have taken down terrorists, taken down bank robbers, taken down crime. And you wrote that the FBI has become so thoroughly compromised that it will remain a threat to the people unless drastic measures are taken. Do you know that under Chris Wray's leadership, he took over at a very difficult time, we all know that, appointed by President Trump, that during his tenure, the applications to the FBI has in fact tripled? Do you think people would be applying to that agency like in those numbers if they thought it was so corrupt?
The American public's trust in it is at 40%. That's an all-time low.
Did you say that the FBI headquarters should be shut down and reopened as a museum of the deep state?
Mr. Chairman, are we allowed to go an extra time?
Let's see, you get a second round. Before I call on Senator Lee.
Could he just answer the question if he said that the FBI headquarters where they investigate cybercrime and terrorism should be shut down and opened as a deep state?
Hey, Mr. Chair.
As a museum. Did he say that the headquarters should be shut down?
Mr. Chair.
I deserve an answer to that question. He is asking to be head of the FBI, and he said that their headquarters should be shut down.
Mr. Chair, parliamentary inquiry.
You got anything you want to say, Mr. Patel, before I go on to Senator Lee?
Simply this. If the best attacks on me are going to be false accusations and grotesque mischaracterizations, the only thing this body is doing is defeating the credibility of the men and women at the FBI. I stood with them here in this country. In every theater of war we have, I was on the ground in service of this nation. And any accusations leveled against me that I would somehow put political bias before the Constitution are grotesquely unfair. And I will have you reminded that I have been endorsed by over 300,000 law enforcement officers to become the next director of the FBI. Let's ask them.
Mr. Chairman, I am quoting his own words from September of 2024. It is his own words. It is not some conspiracy. It is what Mr. Patel actually said himself. Facts matter.
You forget that you had 3 minutes in the next round to say what you just said.
Okay, I'll say them again.
Okay. Before I call Lee.
Mr. Chair, just parliamentary inquiry, and it was on time. It wasn't disputing any of the debate, but I intend to keep to my 7 minutes, and I appreciate you keeping everyone to it. If we go over, can we have that decrement against the time in the second round? If a member goes over, that was actually 10 minutes, Mr. Chair.
I'm not sure that I want to. Sometimes it's faster to get things done here, just letting people shout and than it does to shut them up.
Mr. Chairman, you're a wise man, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, before we go to Lee.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, what do you want?
I love this guy. Mr. Chairman, I'm unlike Senator Tillis. I mean, if we're going to start this, I want an extra 3 minutes.
Well,
now, my friend Senator Klobuchar went 3 minutes over.
So, here what you're saying is the chairman wasn't a very good chairman by not shutting her up. But I've gone through this before, and I think I know how to handle it and get this done.
I think you're a star-spangled awesome chairman. I just want to say that for the record. But if you're going to let somebody over there go 3 minutes over, I want my extra 3 minutes.
Well, let's see if it's abused by anybody else before we make that decision.
I'm just telling you, I'm going to abuse it.
Well, I'm not going to let you abuse it.
You're a good man, Mr. Chairman.
Before I go to Lee, I want to put a statement in the record from 56 former FBI agents wrote to this committee to support this nominee. Quote, never has the FBI faced such an urgent and compelling need for comprehensive reform as it does today. Mr. Patel has proven he possesses the breadth of experience required to address these challenges. His leadership, expertise, and vision make him uniquely qualified to guide the FBI through this pivotal moment. For these reasons, we stand in full support of Kash Patel's nomination. Any objection? So ordered. Mr. Lee.
Mr. Patel, while we're talking about your awards, let's talk about the cowards in uniform comment for a moment, can we?
Please.
Would you like to tell us what that was? Put it in context, help the committee understand what that was about.
I think it's important. Thank you, Senator. During that time on January 6th, I was serving as Chief of Staff at the Department of Defense. And days prior, we had received the authorization from the President to issue the National Guard to protect you and your colleagues. But as you know, the law requires a request before the deployment of that guard. That request did not come in until the afternoon of January 6th. Once that request came in, this, unfortunately, as has been confirmed by his own testimony, I believe, the Secretary of the Army, Ryan McCarthy, failed to immediately deploy the National Guard and instead took a break to speak to media and make personal phone calls. That endangered the safety of you and your colleagues. And if you look at the Biden Inspector General report, we at the Department of Defense authorized the fastest cold start of the National Guard since World War II and the largest occupation since the American Civil War. And the Biden Justice Department said that we, including myself as Chief of Staff when it came to the deployment and employment of the National Guard, acted swiftly and without undue delay.
So that's what you were talking about. And that's why you had the reference to the UCMJ. Tell us what that means.
The Uniform Code of Military Justice is for uniform officers who betray the code of justice and also act inappropriately. And I thought any delay to have the National Guard arrive on scene here must be called out, whether it was a fellow Republican or not, especially someone under my auspices running the Department of Defense.
Okay, so moments ago when Senator Durbin displayed a chart with that quote, there was a reference in part of it to the UCMJ. That's what it was referring to.
Yes, sir.
Those were the cowards in uniform. Those people who didn't do what they were supposed to do, and a lot of people were put in danger as a result.
That's correct, Senator.
Okay, thank you. That's very good to know. I do find it significant that we've heard all kinds of aspersions cast in your direction by people who do not know you, by people who do not share your worldview, by people who do not share your commitment to the Constitution or your commitment to public service. I find it astounding that they're willing to say this amidst such great ignorance, and I find it equally heartening that the 56 former FBI officials who know you best, who have worked with you, who actually know who you are, who actually share your view of the Constitution, of the view that you ought to be a law enforcement agency and not a weapon of political warfare. These are the people who stand by you. Those who cast aspersions don't share those views. Would I be correct in surmising that?
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about the Fourth Amendment for a moment. The Fourth Amendment tells us that in order for the government to breach your expectation of privacy relative to your person, your home, your papers, if they want to search that, if they want to seize you, they've got to get a warrant. And that warrant has to describe with particularity the persons or places to be searched or to be seized and to connect them up with a showing of probable cause. Now, in the case of FISA 702, we're dealing with a somewhat different universe. Now, moments ago, we heard some discussion about FISA 702, about suddenly we've got a different FISA 702 than what we had when President Trump was last in office. Is that true? Because by my count, FISA 702 has not changed substantively since President Trump was in office last.
That's correct.
Okay. And there was also some back and forth discussion about FISA 702 and the use of it and the fact that in real time, it might not work to get a warrant. This, in my view, misses the point. The concern that the American people have with FISA 702 is not about the real-time collection of communications regarding foreign targets. The concern is that once those communications are stored, you have within them what are referred to as incidentally collected communications of Americans. Text messages, emails, recorded phone calls, and so forth. If they want to go in and search for someone, let's say you, if someone wants to go into one of those databases after they've been collected, let's say if you're unwittingly communicating with somebody who, unbeknownst to you, happens to be an agent of a foreign power or otherwise under surveillance under FISA 702. If they wanted to search for you, they wanted to enter your name, your phone number, your email address, or some other personal electronic identifier, would they have to get a warrant to do that under current law?
Under current law, I believe so, Senator.
Under current law, they routinely access that without getting a warrant. In order to access it, they've got their own internal procedures. They're not supposed to use this for light or transient reasons. They're supposed to have a perfectly good reason, and yet we've found that on hundreds of thousands of occasions, they have accessed the private communications of Americans, searching for those individual Americans by name, by number, by email address, whatever it is, without a warrant or anything tantamount to it. On occasion, they've even been used for overtly nefarious reasons. One agent deciding to look in on his father because he suspected his father might be having an extramarital affair. On another occasion, an agent looked at people who were thinking about renting an apartment from him to make sure they were upstanding citizens and could be trusted. Are these appropriate uses of FISA 702?
As you alluded to, the FISA court, it's not me deciding it. The FISA court put out a report in 22 or 23 where 255,000 illegal improper queries of American citizens had occurred. 255,000 reasons why the American people don't trust it. And that's what we must work together, Congress and me, if I'm confirmed as FBI director, restore that trust and protect the mission.
Music to my ears, because I've been a U.S. Senator for 14 years. I've been on this committee the entire time. You were the very first FBI director or FBI director nominee who, when I've asked about this, hasn't said, oh, don't worry about it. We'll handle it okay. We've got good people on the inside. We would never breach the trust of the American people. Do you know what?